I'm Philip. I'm an alcoholic. I was told by Ben if I mess this up not to let you know that my sponsor is Matt H. So, if I mess this up, Matt H. is my sponsor. So, my home group is the Maladjusted to Life group, and it says here on page 76, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. We are now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we had admitted are objectionable. Can He now take them all away, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And I present to you John E.
John, alcoholic.
John.
I thought I was nervous. Jesus, Philip. God. I mean, that was painful just sitting there watching my brother. I would normally roast you, but I just... can't even do that. Thanks, Matt, for asking me. Thanks for the committee, everything they've done. These things don't just happen, by accident. It takes a lot of work, and usually it's the committee chair that gets the thanks, but it's the people back there doing registration and making coffee and filling up waters and stuff like that really make this thing happen. So thank you. Yeah. And thanks to our taper. Everybody says that, but they've always played a big part in my recovery, and you'll hear some of that. But, when Leslie was talking about it, early in sobriety, I got sober young. My sobriety date is July 5th, 1989. I was a year and a half old, and I was very fortunate. I got sober with a bunch of young people. I mean, there was loads of young people where I got sober in Maryland. And they were having the Maryland State Convention in the fall. So I got sober in July. So I don't know, this is August, September, October, something like that. And Cliff Roach was coming to talk. And I said, I don't care, And they just, the deal, right? Just get in the car. And I went up there, and it was a big room. It was probably 500 people, and everyone laughed their tails off all night long. I mean, Cliff Roach will make you laugh. And I didn't think anything was funny. I mean, there was not one line where he laughed, that I laughed. I mean, I just was stone-faced. I was not going to have a good time, much less get anywhere close to recovery. I'm just biding time. And at the end, walking out, I was really disturbed that everybody was laughing and I wasn't laughing. And I had $5. And back then, old man talk, back then, $5 would get you 2 packs of cigarettes and a gallon of gas, maybe a gallon and a half, depending what city you were in. And I said, man, I need to get this talk. I got to figure this out. Why are these people laughing so hard? And it was a big dilemma. 2 packs of cigarettes and a gallon of gas, or this AA talk. And I bought the AA talk and I listened to it for a year and a half straight. Every night I'd listen to it to fall asleep because I just couldn't turn my brain off. And I could probably tell you Cliff Roach's story right now from start to finish. Oceanside, where's that? And so you guys have saved my life, and really they're the archivist of the day, right? I mean they're recording our history. So thanks. But I do have a little bone to pick with Matt. So he's like, hey, he calls me and says, Bob B was going to come down and talk, and he canceled. Like to see, can you fill in? And Bob's one of my heroes. It's okay to have AA heroes. He's not an idol. He's one of my heroes, and So I was like, yeah, and then he says, I said, what are we doing? And he said, he was doing 6 and 7. I was like, 6 and 7. And everybody that I've talked to this weekend who was met said, you're a speaker, look at your tag. What are you talking on 6 or 7? And they go, sorry to hear that, and so I was so nervous, Bob's one of my heroes. You got to find somebody that you can, besides your sponsor, because he's going to die or get drunk, but you got to find somebody else too, right? Like somebody you can follow. AA is full of just a plethora of awesome communicators, and but some I don't really hear. They carry an awesome message. I just don't hear them, but I hear Bob, and so it was a big honor for me. And I called my sponsor. I said, Scott, you're not going to believe this. They asked me to fill in for Bob. He laughed and he said, no, they didn't. I said, no, I just talked to Matt. When we get him on the phone, Matt, tell him. I said, John, they had an empty slot and they asked you to fill it. We'll talk a lot about character defects in the next hour, but, my ego's the committee sat around and said, who most resembles Bob? It's John from Lebanon, So he took me off the hook and didn't give me any sympathy. And so about an hour later, I'm in the car with my wife. We're driving to the doctor. She doesn't let me go to the doctor anymore by myself. And it's part of getting old. Leslie was talking about the book for, what was it, Getting Old Gracefully in Sobriety or something like that. I'm ready for it to be written because I'm not getting old gracefully. I'm hoping Steve will write it. Steve's got the mic next, so I got to be careful. But so, my wife doesn't let me go to the doctor by myself because, last time I went to the doctor by myself, she came back and she's like, well, what'd they say? Everything fine? I was like, yeah, everything's fine. And she's like, well, what did he say? I said, this is good. I'm not big on the whole descriptions, of the doctor. And anyway, so we're going to the doctor, and I said, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Will you come with me? She's my road dog. And she's like, well, I can't. I'm doing this thing with my girls. And she said, what are you talking on? I said, 6 and 7. And she laughed, like you guys laughed. I'm like, well, it's not really funny. And, there's, open up the book, right? You get a paragraph, and, on each. And, so the cool part is, you can just start making stuff up about 6 and 7. Nobody really knows it. You can just say it's related to 6 and 7. But she said, I said, she goes, oh, that's easy. That's easy. And she said, honey, just tell them how God's worked in your life. And because that's what 6 and 7 is about. Tell them about how God's worked in your life. Tell them about how he's cleaned up all the mistakes you've made. You have a lot of those. I'm just I'm not exactly sure that's what she said, but I heard that, She is... Matter of fact, she's right down the road from here, tubing with a bunch of her girls at the Hussawassa, used to be a Hussy River. What's it called? What's it called? The Owassi River. And I'll tell you how much my wife loves me. She called me last night, and she said, we had a meeting last night, and she said, I told my girls, that you were a little nervous about talking about 6 and 7, and we all prayed for you, So find yourself some road dogs. My wife's my road dog, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. And so, my sponsor didn't give me any sympathy, and my wife did not give me any sympathy. So I called Cliff, and because Chrissy had sent me the thing. This might have been the next day. I say, Cliff, I hear we're going to be together in a couple weeks. And he said, yeah. And I said, I see you're doing 2 and 3. He said, not a chance. Not a chance. Well, I'm not switching with you, brother. That's all on you. So, I don't know, man. I don't know how my guys have put up with me. I really like, we do a men's retreat in Maryland, where I'm from, where I got sober. It's outside of Maryland, but it got started in Maryland, called Step Brothers. And Sheldon led it for us a couple years ago. And something he said has rocked me since I heard him say it. He said it's all 6 and 7. All the steps are 6 and 7. And to some degree, I really agree with that, right? it's all about this kind of circling back and refocusing on this God deal. For me, it's this catapult to get back in the cleaning business and get back on the path of God. Bill says at the beginning of 6, this is the step that separates the men from the boys. And I'm sure when I first read that, I was like, all right, let's talk about 8. Let's just keep going. And Steve said something the other day. He's like, I don't know how we were talking about it, but he said, in some senses, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than it is in the book. It's certainly not much more is necessary just to go on, right? Like, we don't figure this 6 and 7 thing out any more than we figure out, really any other steps. Obviously there's some steps with some concrete instructions, and I failed to thank our previous speakers. Leslie, I'm sorry the committee didn't give you more time to talk about 5. You can't do 4 and 5 in an hour, I wanted to hear you do more on 5, but and Cliff crushed it, and last night was really good. I had a tough time listening last night. I was thinking about right now, and but what engaged really last night, like your love of Alcoholics Anonymous was just pouring out of you, and it just made me feel like I'm at home. I'm with my people. So thank you for that. So in thinking about 6 and 7, I think you got to talk about like what are the prerequisites? If I'm struggling with a step, I got to look at the previous step. You have a sponsee that says, "Oh, I'm having trouble with 3." I believe you're having trouble with 2. It's a concept deal, right? Like, and I get that. I had I'm going to talk a lot about I had this kind of, I was going to say second surrender, but it's probably my 22nd surrender in sobriety. But I had a huge meltdown in sobriety where I just lit a nuclear bomb in my life, and I'm going to talk a lot about that because in hindsight, and that was about 18 years of sobriety, and so since that point I've had 18 years and 18 more years of sobriety, and I feel like I've had Richard Rohr talks about the 2 halves of life. I think I've had 2 halves of sobriety. I'm hoping to get another third, to get a little closer to this deal. But when I first looked at 6 and 7 in my early sobriety, I only had 2 problems with 6 and 7. It's the word entirely and the word all. I am partially ready to have God remove most of these character defects. I mean that. I like what Sheldon says that it's all 6 and 7, but I think all of these steps are divinely designed by God to remove what's blocking me from Him and His sentence. And they're all a little bit different, right? Like they all, the first step, second step, they all have this little, it's like this stained glass window with 12 pieces in it, and as the sun rises, the light comes through differently each time, and each one involves some work, but 6, there's not this palatable work. I can't get out this pad, this white pad with black pen, my columns, force my way through the work. I can't, how do you get entirely ready if you're not? How do you get entirely ready if you're not? The same way you when a guy says, I'm having a tough time with the 3rd step, how do I do it? The only answer I got, is kind of, well, go manage your life some more, come back until you're ready to turn it over, or we go look at 2. And so if I'm having trouble with 6, with this entirely part, which I was, what blocks me in the 6th step is this idea that, if I really let go of all these character defects, all of them, not just 99%, if I get rid of all of them, I really won't get what I want out of life. Because that's what I had, even in sobriety, I didn't have this adult life before I got here. I got here as a kid. The spiritual awakening was what happened at the Grateful Dead concerts in the parking lot. That's a spiritual awakening. When I got here, you couldn't convince me that that's what I needed. I just needed, get the girl and get my own place and get a decent job, maybe a driver's license. It's optional. I have a driver's license. Maybe some insurance type of deal, and then if I can fix these problems, I'll be okay. And so I didn't have this adult life experience. I had plenty of experience of my character defects not working. You don't wind up. First time I was introduced to AA was 16 years old, and I wasn't ready, But so I think some of it for me, it just takes age, just takes time, to really use up these character defects where I'm like, I'm just done with them. I'm just done as can be. I remember like having about, I don't know, somewhere 10, 12, 13, 14 years of sobriety. I was kind of, in between sponsors, which means sponsoring yourself. And, but I picked up to this guy, Melvin, who was just, and I had this little bad habit of gambling too much. And, we went bankrupt, but whatever. It's, maybe not a habit quite, but like in the middle of that, I'm talking, I know this is a problem, right? And I know it causes me to do things I don't want to do. And I remember Melvin talking to me. He said, John, why don't you just talk to your wife about it? Why don't you bring her into the solution and maybe she'll help you be accountable? I thought, well, Jesus Christ, if I tell her about it, I'm going to have to stop, this idea, like if I don't have these character defects to some extent, like how do you enjoy life? Like, I like the religious people, but like, I like to get my freak on too, I don't, like Cliff said, I just get in trouble for thinking things and, so, in looking back, like, and at the time I probably thought I was entirely ready, I just didn't know any better. Because the old belief that was driving this, that I really stems from this kind of second step concept, that God, is kind of half interested in me. Yeah, God's there, but does he really want me to be happy, joyous, and free? Because like I said, I was young when I get here, and so I think this thing is about, okay, I got to stay sober, but like now I got to go achieve, I got to go conquer the world, Bill talks about happy, joyous, and free, and my problem is, I get happiness and pleasure confused. And so I start chasing pleasure, and, I wanted the character defects removed that are keeping me from a mansion and a Mercedes, I want the character defects removed that are keeping my wife from behaving the way I wanted to behave. Let's leave it at that. Because I had this, like, I could do the math. I had this job. I've always been a salesman. Part of my character defects, I've always been a salesman. Because if you can do really well, you can be a bad employee. Right? Like, I've worked at a couple printing shops over the years, 3 of them, and very quickly I became the best salesman they had. Not because I have a great work ethic, trust me, I don't. Not because I have some, like, moral high ground of, honest days pay for an honest, no, I'm not interested in that either. Like, if I am the top producer, you cannot tell me what to do. I can come late, I can leave at, so like I like to come in at 9:30, I'm going to bust my tail for about 2 hours. 11:30, I'm going to the noon meeting, see my boys, have a long lunch, come back to the office about 2, I'm going to work real hard till about 3. I'm going to leave, I'm going to stop at the way home, play a round of golf, get home about 7:30. I want to help my wife before she puts the kids to bed at 7:35, and then let her go to the 8 o'clock AA meeting. I'm killing it, and I'm making good money. Back then, it was good money. It was, I don't know, $100,000 or something. And so I do the math and I say, all right, if I can work 3 hours a day and make 100, why don't I work 6 hours and make 200? So those are the character defects I want removed, not the ones that are blocking me from God. I want the ones that are keeping me from what John wants. At the end of 6, what Bill says separates the men from the boys is, this is the litmus test, are we going to follow this self-determined objective or the perfect objective? And I have no idea what the perfect objective really is. I think crushing it in the AA world, I'm doing this deal. I, try to help some people and going to meetings, and my wife are living the AA dream. She's sober a long time, and I started getting off kind of the path in AA. I started. This is what my life looks like, chasing the self-objective, the self-determined objective instead of this God objective. I'm coming to meetings a little bit late, and I'm leaving a little early because I'd purchased this business that I had no qualifications to buy, right? But I had this vision of grandeur. it's time for me to be the boss. I'm 32 or something like that. I can't remember how. 18 minus 50. I'm 30 something, and I figured, if I can be the boss, get some power, and I can make some more money, then I can decide what I make, and it went to crap. This whole business thing went to crap, and the economy went to crap, and I'm not really interested in the God objective. I mean, I want to stay sober. I want to stay sober. But this relationship with God was kind of like this. Like I'd almost figured out the system to God. They told me what I had to do to stay here when I got here. John, you get up in the morning, say your prayers. Say the third step prayer, say the seventh step prayer. Get on your knees, go about your day, go to a meeting, try to help somebody. Be a good husband. Blah blah blah. At night, if you haven't taken a drink, say thank you, rinse, repeat, and keep going. And at the time, it was like this. Magic decoder ring that they get in the cereal box, right? I mean, just figure out the code, and it was working, by the physical aspects. What you all told me was working, but my spirit wasn't growing. I wasn't getting. It didn't feel like I was getting closer to God, and I just started chasing self. My experience is that self cannot be satiated. I've never had enough sex. I've never had enough money. I've never had a big enough boat. I've never had a big enough house. I've never had anything that fills this God-sized hole in me. And I nearly died stone cold sober, man. I ruined everything in my life. You want to talk about I was in complete management. Everything that I touched went to crap, and it was all about self. And at the time when the aftermath of this happening. I kind of looked back, like, what in the hell happened? I thought, man, did I miss the magic 4-step? Did I miss a column? Did I miss this? And it was really, I just let self take back over. And you don't know it. You don't know it when self takes back over. I went for a little run, after Leslie's talk. Well, that might be a little generous. A fast walk, and you know how the iPad, the iPhone and iPads are like. It'll tell you on your phone when you left something behind. And if you got your earbuds in, it'll audibly tell you. And so I got around the building and down the street, and it says a device has been left behind. 200 meters or whatever it tells you. I mean, I wish I had that like in early recovery, right? Like you have left the boundary of God's will. You are now seeking self. Like I could use that. Even today. I forgot what I was talking about. Self. Yeah. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of all of our problems. And, so I'm trying to make, I'm just doing things, man, that are just trying to make myself feel better. And I'm full of so much fear, man. Fear is all over my character defects. I mean, it is my number one character defects. If you pull up the 7 deadly sins, I don't know if that's on there, but man, I got it. I think the big book is wrong in 2 places. I do, and that's one of them. Bill says 100 forms of fear. I had 327 this morning when I woke up, and I could probably give you another 327 forms of fear. I mean, fear is, fear that you're not going to like me, fear that you will like me. And when I went back through I'm getting ahead of myself. So I buy this business, it goes to crap. We move a county north, and I really don't get plugged into the AA, And the guy I bought this business from was in AA, and it went south, and he had to repossess it. And I'm just going to tell you shortly, oh man, time's flying. In 1 year's period of time, John seeking self, this is what happened. I got arrested in sobriety for the 3rd time for the same thing. I don't like paying my speeding tickets. And in the state of Maryland, they got this policy. If you don't pay them, they'll suspend your driver's license, which really isn't a big deal because you can still drive. Because they don't come get it. You just drive. They don't come get your car. And unless they find you driving it, then they'll take your car. And this is the crazy thing. I'm like 16 or 17 years sober. There's the only story I got. I'm 16 or 17 years sober. I'm at dinner with a sponsee. It's the only one I had that stuck. and we're eating this fancy dinner that I can't afford, and he can't afford, certainly. And I'm telling him all these wonderful spiritual principles of AA. And he went to his car, and I went to my car, and as I left the restaurant, I went the wrong way on a little ramp out of the shopping center. The cop pulled me over. And in no time at all, I'm behind, my hands behind my back, leaning against the car. I'm waiting for my sponsee to fly by, like, call me tomorrow. I'm so full of, it's just. So I get arrested in sobriety. I'm going bankrupt. My house is in foreclosure. My cars are repossessed. I got little kids, and my lights are being turned off. You can lie to a 3-year-old, but that 9-year-old figures it out. The 3-year-old, I'm like, oh, they're doing construction down the street. They got to turn it off for a little while. We're at Walmart, getting Coleman lanterns, And the kid's like, oh, we're going camping in our front yard. It's just awful, Cars are gone, I'm just dying inside. And IRS bills, I got this business found. I owe $600,000 on this house, on this business. And I got 2 garbage bags. That bill, the ones you get at Christmas that you can fit like 3 pairs of shoes in? Lori knows those size, And they're both stacked to the top with bills. And I can't even look. There could have been a check for $1 million in there, and I wouldn't know. There wouldn't have been. But, I just could not. I could walk in the room and not even know that. I have this ability with my character defects to, just walk in a room and not even see anything. Just complete, full flight from reality. And I traded in the thing that I was I traded in the thing that I was most proud of in my sobriety. I used to say all the time, I've done a lot wrong in recovery, but I've never been unfaithful to my wife. And I traded that in. This young woman that worked for me had a sister, and we were at this business lunch, and she was there, and she flirted with me, and I was so spiritually sick, I did not, I should say. I certainly could have. I did not ignore it. And that was the beginning of a bottom that brought me really to 6 and 7. It absolutely devastated my wife. It devastated our family, and we went on this path to recovery of doing something different, and what happened was after a few months of trying to recover from having an affair, which is nearly impossible, at least for a guy like me, but we were fighting it out. We got a whole rack of small kids, and I just can't take it anymore. I still don't have a sponsor. I still don't have the solution, I'm just going to meetings, and I can't go to meetings in the county that we live now because she sponsors half the county. And every time I walk in, the women look at me like I got a scarlet letter on my head, There's the guy that broke my sponsor. And I can't go to the county south where I got sober, where I screwed up that business because the guy's in the program. I owe him $600,000, so I can't go anywhere. I'm driving 2 hours to meetings where people don't even know who I am, just to try to act like a newcomer, And I just couldn't take it any longer. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I found myself on the kitchen crying like a schoolgirl. And of myself, chasing self, without this perfect objective that Bill talks about, the best thing I can come up with 18 years of sobriety is rifle or shotgun. And I had this great moment of clarity. I'm sitting on this kitchen, I'm crying, and I just full of so much pity. Look at my life. Everything. There was not one, I'm not being exaggerated, there was not one area of my life that you could look at and pinpoint to give me a little hope. Like, hey, John, you're handling this part okay. There was nothing. I was like, it doesn't work. And I heard this voice in the back of my head, I don't think God talked to me, but I heard this truth in the back of my head, and it was like, dummy, you're not doing AA. And I looked at the last couple of years of my life, like a movie scene, this fast-forward clip, and I was like, holy, I am not doing this deal. And I made this great surrender that I've never made sense. It was the 7-step prayer for me. I didn't know it, but it was the 7-step prayer. I used to say for the first 18 years of my sobriety, I used to say the 3rd step prayer, the 7-step prayer. sir, you have to stop yawning. I know it's after lunch, but you got to stop yawning. I'm going to start yawning too. I'm just teasing. I said this 3rd-step prayer and the 7th-step prayer so fast, so often, it just didn't even mean anything to me anymore. I was no longer a seeker. God, give me this. Hey, J-Man, how about a little extra in the paycheck this weekend? The spiritual paycheck. Give me some goodies. It's kind of like what we do. I'll point out when we said the Lord's Prayer after Leslie. How many said the prayer? I don't know. I know I'm guilty of not. Maybe first couple sentences, and then I'll start thinking about dinner. And then I'll come back right at the end and give you a strong amen, or something like that. But I said this prayer. I think it was a stronger prayer than I'd ever said in my life. And it was, God, fix me or kill me. Do one of them quick. And that's when I, in hindsight, became committed to this perfect objective that Bill talks about. And this perfect objective that Bill talks about is not about being perfect. It's about developing this ideal, this goal to shoot for, something other than the sex status and security that I'm, so in love with. My ego will just regenerate faster than anything. It's like, it's unbelievable. How you see a little valley get crushed by a forest fire, and the next day there's like a little seedling, like boop, that's my ego. It doesn't matter, And so what I want to tell you about that is, one thing is talking about tapers. I got introduced through a tape, and I'm going to talk more about that tonight. But I got introduced to a guy that thought this crazy idea that our book was an instruction manual. And I tell you all that to tell you that in going back through the steps, like with a new set of glasses, it was just an amazing process. I seem to attract a lot of sponsees that have about 15 to 20 years of sobriety that just train wreck their life. And, I'll get a call from somebody, hey, this is Steve in, Zimbabwe. You don't know me, but so-and-so said I needed to call you. And I go, uh-oh. What'd you do? Right. I know what's coming, Well, I went bankrupt and my wife threw me, stone cold sober, Not even having the excuse, well, I'm out there smoking crack and she left me, not even that. But I made this great surrender. I meant it. I meant it with all my being. Lie detector test my butt. I meant it. And a month or so later, nothing had changed. Surrender does not equal change. And I met this old fool, and he got me into the book. Man, I just realized, I'm not even saying that I missed stuff. Just the new set of a new set of glasses, a new level of willingness. That's why I think 3, 7, and 11 really are. It's just this new degree of willingness. The third step, we're surrendering this idea that I can manage. I'm surrendering, as Leslie pointed out, my thinking and my actions. But we really don't know what that means, especially if we're getting quick into the steps. And when I went back through the steps of this old man, I thought I was convinced that the issue. So my wife and I are trying to recover from this affair, and we're trying to figure this out, man. We saw the priest. If the Dalai Lama had been in town, we'd have seen him. We saw every couples therapist we could find. We read every book. We really wanted to make this work. We really wanted to fix John. And I don't say that. I'll just quickly say some opinion here. They say when something like that happens in a marriage that, it's really a two-person affair. Like one person does not do that in a vacuum. You understand what I'm trying to say? And that's not my experience, right? There was nothing in my marriage that you could have pointed to. And these people who were telling us this were not in our program. They don't understand maybe they do. But that wasn't my case. I'm not telling you my wife is perfect, But there was nothing where I could look and be like, oh, she didn't make me feel loved enough, or she didn't do her part, or I didn't have any of those excuses, right? My wife is incredible, and so we're going back through these steps with this new level of desire, and And about 3 months had gone by, and I finally got a hold of this guy, and we're going back through the book, and I thought that what I had missed was like the fourth step. I'd missed that. I didn't do that fourth column. I didn't pray down the list. That was the missing golden nugget. That's what Cliff talked earlier about. Why we're here this weekend. And I would come to weekends like this, kind of looking for some golden nugget. I'd look at who the speakers are. Oh, that guy sucks. I'm not listening to that one. This one's good. I'm looking. And the magic doesn't happen during these hours that someone gets up here and speak. That's not the magic. The magic happened in the I don't know how many 10 committee meetings that you had. Whole group of people getting together trying to serve their AA community. I'm telling you, much more magic happened in those 10 committee meetings than happened up here with, what we've had to say by all stretch of the imagination. The magic that happens in these things is out here, by the coffee pot. When some new guy who got dragged here finally says, "Hey man, can I talk to you for a minute? I'm dying." Or maybe it's the old timer who's been off the path, for a long time, who finally says, "Man, I got to get back in the middle. I've been chasing self and I'm dying, And but that wasn't it. It wasn't the magic fourth step. It wasn't the missing column for me. It was this cumulative package of all the steps, right? So if I'm having problems with the sixth step, this entirely part and this all part, I got to look back to the previous step. Obviously, my fifth step was not searching and fearless, because if my fourth step wasn't searching and fearless, if it did not create this fifth step that created this desire for me to go forward, right? Like at the end of 5, it says, real quick, the prerequisites, did we leave anything out? Do we use, do we make mortar without sand type of deal? These couple quick questions, and I'll tell you, when I did my first really solid fifth step, the question was unmistakable. Yeah, I'm ready, right? I do this fifth step, and I got this smoldering pile of rubble in front of me that there's no other choice. Like, I can't deny what's happened. Thank God my sponsor, I think the magic of the fifth step, because what happened to me for a long time, what I did didn't happen to me. I would share 90% of what was going on in my life with everybody. Cliff's got 90, Steve's got 90, Matt's got 90, because I know what you told me is true, that I'm only sick as my secrets, I can't have secrets, but I got this fear, again, that we keep talking about, that if somebody knows all of me, they're going to be like, let's not invite John tonight. I mean, that dude's, crazy. And the wild thing is like, I have had a pathetic life. Like, there's no real bodies buried. It's all up here, right? I mean, like, what's the old saying? I'm not much, but I'm all I think about, I mean, every time I've done a half-decent fifth step, my sponsors have been like, that it? Like, yeah, I'm just pathetic, I mean, what? And I mean that, like, I've had I don't mean this in a self-deprecating way. I've had a pathetic life compared to what has been given to me. Like, I have had no trials put on me by the world. My wife, didn't die of cancer. My kid wasn't born missing a leg, in terms of, like, I haven't had these worldly tragedies. Like, all of the tragedies in my life have come from seeking self. Every single one of them. But yet, I'll go back time and time again. I mean, you're talking to a guy who's bought like 4 boats in 6 years. I buy a boat, I don't need, sell the boat, I don't need a boat, I don't use a boat, but then I find myself on the internet for like 12 hours watching boat porn. A lot of times speakers come up and they, talk about, the problems they used to have. I still got them. I'm going to tell you the truth. 36 years sober, self is still an issue. And that's why I got to be in the middle of this thing. I still got to have a sponsor I'm talking regularly to. I got to have my road dogs. My sponsor's greatest gift to me is his transparency. He'll call me with his stuff. I'm like, you got the right number, dude? Like, he's like, I got to talk to you. I'm like, you did what? Because I had this idea that sponsorship was like this some type of hierarchical system where like complaints and problems only went one direction. Yeah, I don't know why I got that idea, but I did. Thank you. My wife got me these glasses, but I'd rather hold the menu down here. Part of my full flight from reality of getting older. Getting older is a pit. Glasses, hearing aids, Viagra, blood pressure medicine. I mean, God bless. I'm not wearing the glasses. I'm not wearing the glasses all the time. My kids make a joke, like every family picture, we have a little family thread and we text pictures everywhere. Every picture, there's like 7 pairs of like glasses that are casualties that are, laying in the corner up on the shelf. Anyways, I'm not well yet. I found for me like, so I'm going back, through the steps with this guy. And what I found, the thing that was really blocking me the most was this, my old ideas about God. For a long time, my sobriety, I'm putting this, first time through the steps with my sponsor, we glazed through the second step. The chapter says, I thought the chapter was titled, To the Agnostics. That's not what it says. It says, We Agnostics. I looked at it. It might as well be a chapter to the wives. I'm not, I'm not a wife, so let's keep going. I'm not an agnostic. What I came to find out was that I was an agnostic. And there are moments in my day that I am an agnostic. And I'm going to give you that definition. So a Gnostic is somebody with experiential working knowledge of God, or the subject matter. Experiential working knowledge of. And so it's not a question of your faith and your belief system, but I would submit to you that if you had a working, effective relationship with the power greater in yourself, you would have tapped into that and not wound up in Alcoholics Anonymous, And there's still times where I act like an agnostic. I'm here to tell you, and I believe this with all my being, as I stand here before you, my relationship with God is the most important thing in my life. And I see a lot of heads nodding. But God, I sure have a tough time acting that way. Why don't I act that way? When I have this knowledge, why don't I act that way? Why aren't I kinder to the person that screws up, I mean, the amount of people that I've withheld love and mercy and charity from is disgusting. I'm just telling you. Whether it be the crazy girl at my home group. You got one, sir. I see that. We might need to talk after the meeting. I heard this thing the other day I really liked. I'm going to steal it. He said, don't worry, God only calls us to love 3 types of people, 3 ways. Justly. All right, I can do that. So like justly is the people I'm supposed to love. My parents, my kids, easy. I can do that. And the second way is charitably. Those are the ones that I'm not too sure about. I don't know if my neighbor deserves it, but I will. I heard they had a baby, so I'll bring over some cupcakes. Or, the teenage girl or the middle-aged girl, whatever, someone on the side of the road with a flat tire. I don't know if they deserve my help, but I'm called to be charitable. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to do that. And then mercifully, I'm called to love those that don't deserve it. And that's really tough for a guy like me. Because I have these 4 things that I've kind of like seen that like stop me from humility, right? This 7-step prayer that we take, the 7-step and the 12 and 12 is all about humility, right? After being given this assignment of 6 and 7, I got back into our 12 and 12. I hadn't read it in a little bit. Bill uses the word humility 31 times in like 6 pages. Duh, right? Like I might want to try some. But I talk about there are 4 things that I need to surrender, and there's 4, and they're the same things. They're the 4 things that stop me from having humility. And one is this need to be right, right? The need to be right does not coexist with humility. And you're probably sitting here saying, well, I really don't have that need to be right. Tell me about the last time you had a political conversation with somebody from the other side. Did you have a need to be right? I'll tell you, I just learned this recently about myself. Like, my desire to cut my wife off mid-sentence is the need to be right, Like, what you have to say doesn't matter. You're not seeing it my way, this need to be right. And it's, this need to be right is painful. And it has absolutely no value. I'll share you a little story. My son, John, the love of my life, my baby boy, carries my name. When he was 17, he was getting ready to be a Boy Scout. Thanks to his mother, did some of his merit badge things, She just cracked the whip until he got it, She beat him into becoming a Boy Scout, And so when you become a Boy Scout, you have until you're 18 years old and 0 days. One day after, you're out. No luck. And so you have to do a service project to become a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, which is a big deal. And so he picked his project the very last minute, because he's in Edmonds. And his was going to be, he was going to build this little campfire thing at the halfway house. And I thought that was really cool. And I kept telling him, John, you got to schedule this. You got to get some, because they had to go and ask people for money to do the thing. You can't get the money from your parents. I kept, I'm cracking the whip, nagging him. Laura, you understand. And I said, listen, man, in November I got this, men's retreat to go to. Like, we got to, Anyway, so he schedules this thing. And it is the weekend of my favorite weekend of the year. This men's retreat I go to, very special to my heart, 30 men. This retreat saved my life. And so he's like, hey, I scheduled it all myself. I'm like, great, when is it? He's like, whatever, November 9th. I'm like, buddy, that's my weekend. I go to Nashville and I go to my sponsor. He's like, I know, Dad. And I started beating him up. I'm like, listen, this is not how the world works, son. You cannot, fail to schedule something correctly and expect the world to readjust to help you. And he's like, I know, Dad, you're right. And I kept beating him. And he kept saying, you're right. And so I was like, all right, well, now we got that clear, I'm right. And shit. And so I get on the plane and I go to this retreat and I'm sitting there. And it's Friday at 2 o'clock and I know exactly what's happening. He's at the halfway house with some guys doing the project. And I'm sitting at this stupid retreat and I know I'm right. And I don't want to be there. If I had the ability, which I don't, to charter a jet, pick me up in a helicopter, and drive me home that minute to make it in time, I would have. And the problem with the needing to be right is, for me, it leads to this need to punish. Think about the last time you were at a restaurant and got terrible, terrible service. I had this little business, still have this little business. Me and my partner were doing really good, and we used to go to these fancy lunches every day. Big fat boy lunches. $150 for the two of us. Let's eat 5 lunches and 3 appetizers, 2 desserts. And so we're at our regular place, Stanford Grill in Columbia, Maryland. Great place. We always sit at the bar. We sit at the same spots. We get the same girl to help us. We sit down, and our appetizer is already in the thing. Our drinks are already. It's I know it's pathetic. And so they got a different girl, and she does an awful job. I think this was her first day, not only as a waitress, but her first day in the workforce. I mean, no silverware, no water, no drinks. Like, she got him the wrong meal, got me the wrong meal, and he starts, taking forever, and we're getting worked up. Worked up. And my partner's getting really worked up, because he doesn't have this thing that we have. And I was, I was always the guy that paid. I paid the bills for the company, and so she gives me the bill. And I'm getting ready, and I'm all pissed off. So what do you tip her? 0, right? And I had this quick moment of clarity that I had this opportunity to either just be right, punish her, or just to love her right where she was at. And the lunch was $125, and I gave her a $125 tip, and I gave it. And so I didn't want my partner to see it. And we got in the car. He said, "Did you just tip that girl $125?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What were you thinking?" I said, "Tony, God's been over-tipping me for bad service my entire life." Right? That's that trying to love this, in a merciful way. The other one is this need to be powerful. You think about it, what that looks like. It has a bunch of different faces, but like think about early sobriety when your sponsee doesn't do what you tell them to do. You know, I remember yelling at my sponsor, I told him to call me every day. You know, like, come on. But it showed up recently. I sponsor this guy with long time, 25 years plus. And he started sponsoring this guy at the treatment center that we go to. And in short order, I figured out, not by investigating, but like I found out this guy was not taking him through the 4-step the way that I took him through. And I'm bent out of shape. I'm like, I'm not bent out of shape. I'm not giving a hard time, but like, it's going on up here, I got this need to be powerful, which is weird because I don't like having power at work, right? Like the joke is if you really like power, you're the one who's a slave. If you're the boss, you're telling everybody what to do. You have to tell them what to do. If you're just the guy that paints the ceiling, when you get to work, you go, which ceiling, boss, right? He goes, that one, and you start painting. The two I'm going to glaze over real quick is this need to be effective, which is like kind of like this need for praise. Like we were talking about it, I forgot who it was. We were talking about it earlier. Like I have such a fear of failure. If I am not relatively 99% certain that I'm going to be successful, I'm not playing the game. Like I'm just not. If I can't be the king of the idiots, I don't want to play. Which is really showed its face for me. Like I don't know if a lot of you guys go to treatment centers or stuff like that, but like where I really learned this first one was this need to be effective. My friend is down the director of the Salvation Army in D.C. They have like a 600-bed facility. He says, John, I want you to come down and talk. So I show up and talk. It's a room this big, at least as big, probably twice as deep. And Monday night, and he says, all right, just going to come down. And we're sitting in his office talking before the meeting. I said, how many guys you expecting? And he's like, I don't know. We made it optional. I don't know why you make meetings optional at the treatment center, but hey, I'm not in charge. And there's a football game on, and I'm sitting in this room. I'm telling you, that holds 600 people, and 6 guys show up, and they're all in the back, and they're all like this, the entire hour, and I was shook up. I guarantee it was one of the worst talks I ever gave, right? Because I had this need for somebody to nod their head, somebody to look at me in the eye, not yawn, no problem, sir. I mean, I just had, I need my wife to pat me on the head and say, good job. I mean, there's one thing I don't do, and that's vacuum, right? But the few times a century that I vacuum, and my wife's gone, because she's always complaining about the dog hair. We're never getting another dog. I mean, she loves my dog. She's like, we're not getting another dog. I'm like, yeah, we're getting another dog. So there's one day, I'm like, I'm going to vacuum. And I knew she was going to be home about 5 minutes. I did not put that vacuum away. I left that vacuum dead center. She walked in the house. She goes, did you break the vacuum? I said, oh, no. I left it out. I've been vacuuming all day. I just left it out. I did not dream I was going to come close to running out of time. This fourth one is this need to possess. Like this idea that I got to have something. Like it's mine. And we all know, right? Like we don't take anything with us. And this lesson became really clear for me when my wife and I are trying to, rebuild our marriage and lead a godly life. We went a long time without. I told you our house was in foreclosure, but it was during that crisis. We didn't pay a mortgage payment for 2.5 years, and somehow we were able to stay in that house. And we just gave that house to God and AA and newcomers and big book studies. We had a guy down in the basement getting sober, and we just rocked it. You said everything's God's, everything's God's. And you got to be careful when you say it out loud. He will take you up on it. So I let this girl, so things are kind of financially repairing a little bit. And I lent this girl that works for me underneath me, $500. And she didn't pay me back. She's a single mom, 300 kids or something. She's paycheck to paycheck. I mean, I know I'm never getting that money back, but I was getting ready to go on vacation. I wanted that $500. And every Friday she's like, well, this is, there's a problem. And But there's one, so I'm pissed, because my money. So I break up my phone. I got all caps. And this is back before the iPhone had the function where you could do automatic all caps. So you got to hit the arrow and then the letter, arrow and then letter. So I'm like, tap, 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 tap. And I'm like, how dare you? You are stealing from me. You are taking food from my children's mouths. You are stealing my money. And this truth in the back of my head said, God does not speak to me. Do not. But there was this great truth, and it was, John, if everything is God's, she can't steal from you. And that was the truth. And I had to learn that little lesson because my wife's mother and I were not friends. The resentment ran deep. I used to be a golfing whore. I will golf anywhere, anytime, with anybody, at any cost, doesn't matter where it is. And we used to go down to Myrtle Beach, golf capital of the United States, and we'd play 10 rounds in 5 days. And her mom lived in Myrtle Beach. And so we'd go down to Myrtle Beach, and I'd come back, and the kids would say, hey, did you see Grandma while you were down there? And I'd say, no, I didn't see Grandma. But after a couple of years, we used to do it 2-3 times a year. So after a dozen times, one of the kids figures it out. Like, why don't you see Grandma while you're down there? And I said, listen, if I caught on fire next to your grandmother's pool, I wouldn't jump in it, okay? That's how deep the resentment was. And my wife, they had a really abusive relationship. My wife would go down there, my wife would come back in pieces, just a wreck. And so my wife's mother got sick, and she had peripheral artery disease. Like her veins were no longer pumping to her legs, and she lost function of her legs, and she started losing toes and stuff. And what happened in this transformation in doing this deal that we do, we had many talks. She said, I know when my mom gets sick, she can't come here at the end. I know she can't. I'm glad you know that, because she can't. And she got sick. And my wife brought her up to a rehab center a couple months near us, and they're like, take her home. And my wife called me up, and she says, I'm bringing my mom home. I said, bring her home, And I was able to love this woman, love the unlovable, She had known me, 30 years, 28 years, and I hadn't seen her in a decade. And in that time, I had done this work that we talk about. And she died in our dining room where my wife could take care of her. And after a week of being there, she said to my wife, she said, that's not the same man I knew before I went down to South Carolina. And that's because of you people. I want to tell you a couple things in the few hours that I have left about what living on this other side has done. Living just poorly aimed at this perfection ideal that Bill talks about, this perfect ideal, this godly ideal, trying to live a life of love and mercy and charity. Just poorly trying to do it. Some amazing things that happen. If AA were a self-help group right now, I would say you can have anything you want, you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want. I don't think that's true. But what I know for certain is that God can do anything with you. God can do remarkable things with you. I want to tell you 2 things that He's done with me. One, I told you fear's my deal, right? I'm a scaredy cat. I'm a scaredy cat. And I went to the nation's first recovery high school in Maryland. The judge sentenced me there. And it stayed open for about 15 years, and it burned down. They never opened up a new one. And this group in Washington, D.C. wanted to start another one, and that faltered. I got to do this in about 5 minutes. And so there was a couple people in Maryland that I had taken to their meetings that were interested in starting this recovery high school. This woman that I used to take down there, and it was just heavy on my heart, like, hey, we got to try to do this. We got to try to start a recovery high school. And so Sarah, this woman that my wife sponsors, we were out doing a group inventory in Baltimore. And I said, hey, we got to do this, right? She's like, I knew you were going to say this at some point. I was like, we just got to do it. And she's like, where are we going to get the money? And I'm like, I don't know. That's God's business. And I didn't. That answer just came out of my mouth. She said, where are we going to get a building? I said, I don't know. That's God's business too. Where are we going to get these kids from? I said, I don't know. That's God's business too. It was kind of like that old baseball movie with Kevin Costner. What's it called? Field of Dreams. And so we just trusted God in this process, and we started the process. And so we raised a bunch of money, and a couple $100,000, not enough to sustain a school for a long time. And so we said, hey, as soon as we get close to $300,000, we're going to sign a lease on a building. And so we got $201,000, and we go sign a lease on this building. And we brought this huge donor by, and this guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And this was like the first couple of days of July. And I could tell right away he's not interested. He is out of this deal. He was a real estate developer. But his wife was in. And so I started selling her. And so we sit down afterwards, and we give him the breakout the checkbook deal. He's like, this is a terrible idea. I'm not interested. His name was Marvin. And he said, I'm not interested. I love what you guys are doing, but this building is going to cost. He said, you signed a lease on this building? I said, yeah, I signed a lease on this building. He said, this building is going to eat you alive. He said, how much do you have? I'm like, well, we got close to $300,000. He's like, put a zero on that. I'm like, oh, my. So he calls me July 3rd, and he says, I've been thinking about how I can help you guys, 'cause I love what you're doing. My son was in recovery, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, I appreciate it. He said, do you think you can get out of the lease? I said, oh, yeah, I get out of the lease. And, that's what we do, right? Pack up the glad bags and go. No, I was going to do it the right way. I said, I can get out of that lease. He said, well, if you can get out of the lease, I get out of the lease. He said, I got three properties that I thought might be useful to you. And he named two, and the third one was perfect. It was right in downtown Frederick, where we live, near the bus stop, near the train station, right near the AA coffee shop. Other block is the AA club. I was like, that's the one we want. He's like, well, I don't know. He's grilling me back and forth, blah, blah, blah. So we hang up, and he calls me 2 days later, July 5th, my AA birthday. And he says, it didn't have anything to do with me. I said, he said, what do you think? I said, well, I looked up the building, and I said, he had bought this building because the building next door he gave to the YMCA. He bought that building for $20 million. And this building was $2 million. And I said, I've done the math. It's $2 million. Like, at minimum, that's $10,000 a month rent. I said, that's out of our range. He said, I'm going to give you the building. He said, if you can keep that school open for 5 years, we'll give you the building. And that whole time, every step of the way in this whole process of opening this school, I'm a guy who got thrown out of high school. My name is on a license in a high school in Maryland right now. I have the authority to sign diplomas. We talk about irony. Only all God's work, right? Every step of the way, I'm doubting Thomas. This can't happen. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. And it just happened. I was 20 people were on this committee. This amazing thing happened. 2 years later, we graduated our first student diploma. This last May, she graduated from the University of Vermont, 6 years sober. She went to a sober dorm up there. Like, all because I put fear aside for a second and just put one foot in the other. This last little 2 minutes that I have, I want to talk about fear in my life, just even today. Last summer, I got this wild hair at my backside. I'm going to go to college. And I'd never been to college. When I was 19 years old, I conned some money out of my grandmother to go to college. She's like, how much are the courses? I'm like, they're $150. I need to go to 10 of them. Give me $1,500. So I enlisted in one, kept the $1,350, and stone cold sober. And I got to the parking lot, and I cried my eyes out because I could not go inside. I could not go inside. And I left, man, you're a loser, all this stuff. So I got this hair up my thing, last summer. I'm like, someone told me about this program, like you can fill out this form and give them your work history, and they'll give you credits. And I got ADD bad, and so I get all the paperwork, and I'm sitting at my desk, and like there's like 3 forms, and all day long, I'm like trying to get this paperwork done, I got emails going, phone going, text going, dog going, I'm not getting anywhere. And I called Cliff, man, tore up. I mean, I'm tore up. I mean, it was like I'm 19 years old again, sitting in this parking lot. And he's like, what's going on? I said, I think I need to go on ADD meds. I need some Adderall. He's like, what'd you say? I'm like, yeah, they got this slow release stuff. You know, it's not, you know, it's sober. He's like, I don't know. I was like, well, I can't, you know. He's like, why don't you talk to some people about it first? And so my son was on the slow release Adderall during high school. I said, hey, I got to ask you a question. I said, what do you think about this Adderall? I said, I'm trying to go. He said, no. He said, you cannot take Adderall. I was like, I didn't even finish. He's like, no, you know. And so I didn't get anywhere. And my daughter calls me up, one of my heroes, this little lawyer, and she said, how's the paperwork coming? And I said, well, it's not really. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. She said, I'm coming over Sunday. I'm going to help you. I said, all right. So I got the paperwork out. You know, she comes to my office. We're sitting there. She's like, is this how you try to do paperwork? I said, what are you talking about? She said, you got your computer open, your phone open, you're playing with the dog. She's like, turn everything off and do the paperwork. And like one box at a time. She's like, what's your name? I'm like, so I do the paperwork. You know, I stand here before you like a year and a half later, like I got 93 credits and a 4.0, right? Like I'm telling you, man, like that is zero to do with John. That is zero to do with John. And this, you know, that need to be effective. We talked about earlier, like, you know, I took this class and like nearly killed this professor to get an A, you know, but like God's grace is amazing. God's power is amazing. Like as the book talks about, you know, both you and the new man must walk day by day. And if you do, remarkable things will happen. And that's been my experience. I can't wait to spend an hour with you guys later. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and thank you for my life.